old for video games?
You have failed.
The same way, I will destroy you. And my friend is truly dead.
Now this is pod racing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast. And normally, when recording these shows, we get a small countdown to the Jedi Council chambers. This time, not so. Here we are again, convening in the world of the Mandalorian. In a galaxy far, far away, we dive into the second to last episode of Season 2 that is The Believer. And I would be remiss if I didn't say this is one of my favorite episodes. But Jedi Master Silly Amaz, please give us the background as only you can do for The Mandalorian's The Believer.
Hello there. And thank you, Jedi Master Ursa Master and Jedi Master Lord Uther, and all of you Graying Jedi fans at home who have come with us through the highs of The Mandalorian Season 2. We are indeed at the penultimate chapter in this second season, Chapter 15, The Believer, which first aired on December 11th, 2020. Now, for this chapter and for the season finale, I happen to be suffering from a pretty viral strain of what was going around the country at the time. And with no active medicines in place to combat it, I was basically left to my own devices, bedridden and feeling a little weakened. So what lifts the spirits more than fantastic science fiction television of the First Order? And that's indeed what we got here with The Believer. Writer-director Rick Famuyiwa is our main contestant today. Jon Favreau does not chime in with scripting duties. We've covered Rick before. He's like myself, a USC film school grad. In season 1, Rick helmed chapters 2 and 6. 2 was the second installment after we met the child and Din Djarin. And if you'll remember, that involved nasty little Jawas stripping the Razor Crest and demanding that he go and fight a Mudhorn and bring them the egg. So that was Rick Famuyiwa's debut on the show. We covered that episode, that chapter, in Graying Jedi number 19. And subscribers, go right back to the archives now. Go to the Wayback Machine and check out what we thought of Rick's directorial debut in Chapter 19 of The Graying Jedi, Chapter 2 of The Mandalorian, Season 1. Rick returned for Chapter 6 of that season, which was the Prison Break episode, which featured some of the nastiest, sleaziest villains that we've yet to see in a Star Wars streaming series. And the tables were turned, though. Din Djarin and Grogu got the jump on those baddies, and several of them were locked away in a New Republic prison barge the last we glimpsed them. And we covered that in Graying Jedi 21. Again, friends, go and check these out. These are really, really good. So Rick is back, and so is Bill Burr, comedian, who was in Chapter 6 playing Miggs Mayfield. And Miggs has been spending a lot of time on a chop yard since he was taken into custody. And we'll talk about his contributions to this chapter shortly. We also have a lot of other familiar faces, friends. Tamura Morrison returns as Boba Fett. Ming-Na Wen as Fennec Shand. Gina Carano as Cara Dune. Giancarlo Esposito as Moff Gideon. So lots of old familiar faces in new, exciting places. An episode that was equally inspired by the Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy classic 48 Hours, as well as Henri Georges Clouzot's 1955 black and white classic The Wages of Fear. And you cinephiles who have not yet caught The Wages of Fear, it's a story of 4 men hired by an oil company to drive trucks loaded with nitroglycerin through the South American jungle. Now, nitroglycerin, for those of you who paid attention in science class, can be very unstable with the wrong temperature and driving on a track through the jungle, driving through trails. If you too many bumps, and everything goes boom. So this episode clearly takes its cues from those, as well as the uneasy alliance between Din Djarin and Mayfield as they are forced to penetrate an Imperial stronghold. I also want to call attention to the actor Richard Brake, who plays, he's a Welsh actor, and he plays the Imperial officer that Din Djarin and Mayfield come across. And I want to point him out because we've seen Imperial characters in this show before, Moff Gideon and the Client. We've seen them in Andor, another terrific Star Wars streaming series that we've covered here on The Graying Jedi, and you are going to want to check out our Season 1 recaps of Andor. But this Imperial character in particular, he only gets a couple of scenes, this actor, Richard Brake, but he is so venal and so corrupt and so dastardly. And it just shows the real contempt the Empire has for the New Republic and a free galaxy and things like democracy. And that character, they did a lot with a little, and they pushed Mayfield and Din Djarin to places that they didn't themselves expect that they had to go. This episode was all about finding those lines and then crossing them. And that's where I want to start with the Council. The sacrifices or the choices made by Din Djarin and Migs in this episode, which again gave us completely different viewpoints on their characters, up till now. When we first saw Mayfield, I mean, he was a crown prince of evil. And I think we come away with a very different view of him after this episode, and as well as what Din Djarin is willing to do to risk everything for the child. I will say just one more preface for us to set up the discussion. Mayfield's trigger is pulled when that corrupt, awful Imperial officer references Operation Cinder. And for those Star Wars fans who have not dug deep into the comic books, the current comic book lore, or any of the novels or tie-ins that they have on the show, Operation Cinder was authorized by Emperor Palpatine. Upon his death, or presumed death, he left word for the Imperial remnants throughout the galaxy to lay waste planet genocide to worlds all throughout the inner core, the outer rim, the mid rim. These were planets who were not sufficiently loyal to the Empire in his estimation when he was alive, and they just burned the whole thing down. And just planetary bombardments from Star Destroyers and crop-killing bombs and poison gas and the works. And that was what Mayfield references and the officer takes great pride in, Operation Cinder. It's been a big component of the comic book series, the various issues that they've run, as well as the novels. So that's just a little context for you as to what finally triggers those discussions. But gentlemen, tell me about your impressions of Mayfield and Din Djarin's difficult choices, as well as, again, coming off the Robert Rodriguez helmed episode, The Tragedy, some real slam-bang action. Terrific stunts, effects, the whole works. Rick Famuyiwa knows his stuff.
I gotta say, this is my favorite episode for a lot of reasons. The least of which is certainly not. Bill Burr is just incredible in this episode. And you can go back to our previous episode where Bill Burr was featured on the archives, and I said then it was impressive what he did in a Star Wars show as somebody who famously didn't like Star Wars at all. Like, at all. Was very almost anti-Star Wars. He returns in this episode, and he was great the first time around. I don't know that it's very common to see a stand-up comic or even a comedic actor have such depth of character and such gravitas as this interaction over Operation Cinder in this mess hall. This situation alone, redefines the series in my mind. Not only what we get from Din Djarin here, but just the presentation of, former Imperial, even though he's working against the quote-unquote Empire at this point, somebody who really skirts sort of that gray line, that he hasn't lived the most honorable Jedi-like life. He's certainly lived the dark side a bit here, but has redeeming qualities, and definitely this presents some kind of depth that I didn't think a comic could pull off as an actor, frankly. And I think it's a huge testament to the writing, but really it's just the acting acumen of Bill Burr. I mean, the way he conveys himself in this episode, like, it is very much like 48 Hours. I really didn't make that connection at first, but it really is like that. And I was just so thoroughly impressed with the action, and yet some of the almost pastoral like images as they're going through the jungle. And then it's almost like like a 48 Hours. It's like an 80s movie in a way. It really feels a lot like I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna compare it to Empire Strikes Back. To me, this is on the same level of great with Empire Strikes Back. Like, it gives you so much in such a tight, concise package. Not to mention the least of which, Mando takes off his helmet, and we see his face, which is a huge moment, and it carries an incredible amount of weight. Like, there is so much heavy emotion conveyed in this episode, which feels really different for a Star Wars show, like of any kind. Whether this is a movie we're talking about, or an episode of TV, or a comic book, or a book, this whole episode just delves so deep into the recesses that I don't think Star Wars often touches, and brings them to the front, and just throws them at you in a digestible manner that feels not forced, but just very right and very.
He's been encased in carbonite.
From start
he
to
should be
finish.
quite
So
well.
it's really,
He could be
really
quite well
unwinner for me
protected,
in all
even in
aspects.
there. So,
was
picking up on those
Empire
things,
Strikes Back.
Jedi Master Lord Uther, as we frantically try to get him unfrozen from carbonite. What did you think of?
Well, I think Urza Master, as always, hit the nail on the head. Bill Burr was outstanding in this episode because I think he got to be himself. That's Bill Burr. Like, the entire episode. Just the comments here and there, being a smart, having the smart comebacks and things like that. But even the anger that we see when he is sitting with that officer talking about Operation Cinder. I mean, Bill Burr can be edgy like that at times and can have that side to him. So I feel like they gave him the freedom to just be Bill Burr, and we got to see, I felt like his comedy act, or at least some of those emotions we see in his comedy acts, were completely, coming out in this episode. But I also, to what you're bringing up also there, Jedi Master Cillian Moss, who, by the way, can't wait to get your logo out there for everyone to see. We have this beautiful new logo for our Jedi friend here that will be out there soon. But this episode, to me, I also am wondering too, the idea of like hard time and hard decisions. We see a lot of that, whether it's taking off the mask, driving this truck that could blow up at any time because Din Djarin loves Grogu so much, I mean, we're really seeing that side where he's just completely given it emotionally, and what any father would do for their child. Literally, anything. We would do anything for our children. And we're seeing that, right? He's willing to throw it all to the side, do whatever it takes to get his child back. And that's something that really, shines in this episode. For me personally, I had a little bit of a Firefly vibe in this episode. Just the way they were, driving through the jungle, and the shootout that happens. To me, it felt just a little bit of Firefly-ish. I also love the series Firefly, which I would love to do a podcast on that one day. So, that was something else that was there too. So I have a couple other thoughts, but Mr. Cillian Moss, Jedi Cillian Moss, I'll let you keep going.
Well, I mean, if you were paying close attention to the episode, certainly the child was never far from anyone's thoughts, but this is the first episode, the first chapter in almost 2 seasons in which there is not a single glimpse or cutaway to Grogu, aka the child. It is a Grogu-free zone here on planet Morak. I also take note that one of my favorite spaceships, not the favorite, obviously, the Millennium Falcon still holds near and dear there, but Slave One, we get a better view internally of the interior, right? We saw it in Attack of the Clones with Jango and Boba taking after Obi-Wan in the asteroid field, but we really didn't get a sense of scale, size, and scope. And here they make more allowances for that, and we see how it can be actually disorienting to be seated in the cockpit, or everything, with everything kind of rotating and adjusting and so forth. So I thought that was kind of cool to see Slave One's interior there. Was it just me, Star Trek fans, or did the pirates on the planet of Morak? I got a Jem Hadar from DS9 vibe with the makeup there. It was just alien enough for me to make the connection, and so who knows? Maybe they were separated at birth or by a wormhole. But I had a little Jem Hadar feeling there. Again, we've, in our other successful award-winning podcast, the Warp Core friends, we talk all the time about our favorite Star Trek moments and different crews throughout the Federation. Make sure you're checking in on those episodes as well. And we make good-natured, good-humored cracks about fight choreography from the late 1960s and how it's evolved. But I have to tell you, I mean, take the Robert Rodriguez, The Tragedy, take this episode, and maybe a couple more coming down the pike here. I mean, we've really come a long way, baby, in terms of making, again, fisticuffs and kicks to the head and throwing guys left, right, and off of their skiffs. I mean, again, it's all CGI and good stunt work, but boy, they've really upped their game. And you fear for Din Djarin. He kind of gets kicked around a little by these guys, simply by sheer volume. Not that he's a terrible fighter, but it's just when they just keep coming at him in wave after wave after wave. There's a great moment where, again, the stunt performer playing him, or Pedro Pascal, whomever you choose to credit, looks, because there's 2 more skiffs coming after he's just fought off like 10 of these guys, and he just kind of sighs. Like, you can see his body, his shoulders kind of slump, and then you realize he's like, all right, I guess we're doing this, and he's ready to go another round. Thankfully, I believe the chase ends pretty quickly after that moment. They're rescued by TIE fighters, and that's another moment I'd like to say. We talk about the Rebels and the Resistance and all of these guys, the Jedi, but here was a moment to see, like, Imperials on the ground, right? Like, hey, they got the transport in, and they're like giving them, spontaneous applause and high fives and backslaps. And again, we're cheering that TIE fighters are coming to the rescue and strafing them with green turbo lasers. And that's not something we do all the time in Star Wars. So I thought that was a nice little reversal there of the moment. We got to see the sonic mine again from Attack of the Clones. Slave One deploys it, getting out of a pesky jam. Hey, we have not seen Slave One taking on TIE fighters, so that was kind of cool, right? I mean, if you're a Star Wars kid playing in the backyard, you're like, oh, I've got the Slave One Kenner play ship. I want him to take on Darth Vader's TIE fighter or Imperial TIE fighters. Well, you got your moment here, friends. And then at the very end, we don't get a lot of dialogue from Moff Gideon. That's saved for Din Djarin. But if there was ever a good point of echoing dialogue and callbacks, I thought that this was masterfully done. And was that fear I saw in Moff's eyes? Just a little quiver of, am I in over my head here? As Din Djarin tells him, you have something that I want. I thought that that was a great way to catapult us into what should promise to be an explosive season finale.
I feel, this episode, again, I talked on one of our previous pods about how going backwards and watching these now, you almost appreciate or you understand or the context is a little bit better. And I know I've been complaining about Boba Fett for a while, and it hit me this episode. I feel like he's an excellent supporting character. For me personally. I feel like what we were expecting, like when we saw in Empire Strikes Back, that Boba Fett was going to kind of be the standout one. I feel like him and Mando have switched, right? Like Boba, to me, he's been fantastic as just the supporting Mandalorian that's there playing off of Din Djarin. And can we also give a shout out here to Gina Carano? I'm appreciating her more and more as Cara Dune, watching this for the third time or fourth time that I'm watching it. But I really feel like her character has just done some great things and really stuck out. Her performance, if there is a way to somehow bring her back, which I don't know if there is, I hope that they do when they go after Grand Admiral Thrawn, which is my whole idea for the next trilogy that we're going to see here. And just one more time, Pedro Pascal, with the limited time his face is on that screen, and I'm going to link it to him doing The Last of Us. Every face that he makes, you can, to your point there, Jedi Silly Moss, you can feel the weight. You can just feel what he's thinking. And I think that's one reason why he has been so heralded for his acting, in a sense, is he can just pull those things off. We've heard it with his voice behind the mask, and now we got to see it with his mask off. I think him and Bill Burr in that scene, and I'm sorry, I know you brought up the guy's name earlier that was playing the bad guy, Imperial officer.
Richard Brake, yeah.
Just some brilliant overall acting. I mean, you could feel Bill Burr's anger through that scene, and you could see Pedro Pascal, the way he was feeling too. It was just, if it wasn't for this episode that's coming up, I would say, as a master, this would be my favorite episode. But the next one that we're going to talk about, I hate to say it,
it's pretty big.
Be a little bit.
It's a pretty big shoe.
But yeah, phenomenal episode.
Wonderful. With that, I think it behooves us to bestow our lightsaber ratings. I'll start because I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind as to where I fall, but it is a brilliant emerald lightsaber for me. I do really enjoy the season finale, which we'll talk about next time, but there was something magical about this episode that just all the pieces fell into place for me. Honestly, when I think of Mandalorian, I think of this episode.
Yeah, for me, it is a definite green, no doubt.
Oof.
By the way, I'm saving the front of this for our next episode.
Nicely done.
Let me tell you, friends, it's going to knock you right out of your viewing seat. I also love how they left it at the end. And again, we all have talked, with Bill Burr just kind of walking off. Can we get the gang back together for these movies? I hope it happens.
Never say never.
Mr. There, Jedi Cillian Moss with the new logo that will be debuting at some point this week, which you can't wait to see. Go ahead.
I absolutely can't wait to see it. I hear we forked over several Imperial credits to make that a reality, and I thank all of those who were able to do it. How about some Corona del Pugli extra virgin olive oil, cold pressed?
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful.
It goes great with your favorite breads. And it is extra virgin, and it is very green, and that is how I see The Believer. And fans of the Graying Jedi, I know you're out there. We've seen you in the message boards and on the ratings. So continue watching and continue hoping that maybe someday I'll break, but right now I'm still a perfect green for green with each consecutive episode of The Mandalorian, with only one chapter to go. And then we're off to some new and exciting spaces, which we'll talk about in the next Graying Jedi, episode 30. You won't want to miss it, as will neither of the three of us.
This is the way. And with that, we adjourn back to the galaxy far, far away, and we will revisit The Mandalorian soon. But, for now, as always, may the Force be with you.
And also with all of you.